So Bill, welcome. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Debbie. I uh, was born in Coatbridge, Scotland in 1931. My family life was ideal. It was safe and it was peaceful. My father, he was a fireman, and my mother didn't work, as was the a, a custom in those days. Uh, so up until I was 7 years old, I am told that I was a beautiful speaker. Then my mother sent me for onions. Now in Scotland, they don't say onions, they say ingans. And I couldn't say ingans. So this store assistant said to me, "What do you want, Wally?" I said, "Young guns." And she laughed. And then she brought over another assistant and she said, "Listen to this. What do you want, Wally?" And I said, "Young guns." And they both laughed. From that moment on, I became concerned about how I spoke, and as I began to be concerned, I started stammering, and then I really started worrying about my speech, and it kept going on in a circle until I was a hopeless stammerer. At school, I was told, at school, everybody laughed and ridiculed me, and I couldn't do anything about it. But I spent a lot of time at a blacksmith. Now, in Scotland, the blacksmith made horseshoes and railings and different things like that. And I would watch this blacksmith put a soft piece of iron into the fire and then bring it out when it was white hot and hammer it. He said that made that soft iron strong. And he kept doing that until that soft iron became a piece of steel. I don't know if it was the blacksmith that mentioned this or whether I thought of it on my own. I thought of of these schoolmates laughing and ridiculing me as if I was a piece of soft iron, and I could visualize every time they ridiculed me, it was making me strong. And I think today they are trying to stop bullying, and it won't work. It would be better if they taught those students who are being bullied how to cope with bullying. Anyway, that was my experience there. I'll come back to it again later. As Debbie had said, at 16, I wanted to be a draftsman. And they said, impossible. They said, you are too small, because draftsmen had to be tall because these drafting boards sat on tables 3 feet high, and I was just under 5 feet at that time. And then they said that I wasn't good at mathematics, I wasn't good at English, and on and on. And they said, in fact, you might never be employed. Well, I thought, well, small people aren't going to apply. People who aren't good academically aren't going to apply. I don't have any competition. And so that became a lesson for me. And it's served me well, because in Toastmasters, there's many people who are better speakers than me, but they won't go outside of Toastmasters and speak. And therefore, I don't have any competition when I apply to speak anywhere. That's maybe my number one rule. There is no competition out there. As Debbie mentioned, that I should say I kept going around all the factories in my hometown, and when I didn't find a job, I went, and I never went in circle, and I got a job in a town 6 miles away. And in Scotland, a town 6 miles away has almost a different language, dialect and that. But I got a job. I got a job as a draftsman. After I served my time, in 1956, I came to Canada, and I got my first job, as Debbie said, 12 hours after landing at Toronto train station. I eventually got a job in a company in Cambridge, Babcock's and Wilcox. Babcock, at the start wasn't a very good experience. I had a supervisor who didn't like me, and he was an ex-army sergeant major, and every second word he used was an F word, you see, and he treated me miserably for the first 3 years, until I told him where he could put his job, and I threatened to leave. And he got me a raise to stay. After that, he and I had a love-hate relationship, because we would constantly argue, and as a supervisor, often our chief draftsman would come down and say, "Quieten down, boys, quieten down." And he would go to his desk, sit down, and I would say, "And another thing," and it would start up again. But nobody in the company would speak to this man, because they were afraid of him. Even our president wouldn't talk to him. But after my wife died, and I had been out of Babcock's for 6 years, and he had died, his wife sent her condolences. So I imagine he would go home every night and tell about the latest episode that he had with Bill Cassels. I found in Canada my stammer was not a disadvantage. It was an advantage. I didn't stand around and talk. I worked and I produced more drawings than anyone else, and I learned. I became an authority in many different areas of that industry, so that I was well paid. In 1956, as I say, I came to Canada, and I asked my girlfriend in Scotland if she would marry me, and she accepted. And some months later, she sailed across the Atlantic and she married me. It was very brave of her to do so. And that we raised two girls and an adopted son. Both my girls are now speakers. In 1974, I decided to get rid of my stammer, and I found it very, very difficult to get over it. Until I went back to that store again. Remember the store? And I looked at that situation from an adult point of view. And I realized that these women did not cause my stammer. It was my choice. I could have said, I can make people laugh. I'll be a comedian. But instead, I made the wrong choice. And that is another lesson I learned and follow to this day, that I am responsible for my own life, not other people. No matter what they do to me, they are not responsible for my reaction. That is another thing. So now I am old, and I tell people I want to live to be 100, even if it kills me. But I met a man in 2018 whose father had lived to 117. And I thought then, that's 30 more years I've got. I could have, if I lived to 117. And so I've been thinking now of aiming for that. Most men peak out at age 50, and then they start declining. And that is why so many men die before their wives. They just decline. Whereas I try to improve every day, not by 30% or 20% or 1%, but by 1/10 of 1%. And that's small enough. I can achieve that in all areas of my life, in my finances and my speaking and in all areas of my life. I am constantly improving. I am underneath here, I've got a body of a teenager. I wished I had found exercises that I could have I could have used on my face to get a teenage face, but there I am, I'm stuck with it. So that is my story. As I've shared with you some lessons I've learned, and I hope that they will help you to be uh, resilient in the future, because you have control over your own life. You don't, and remember, you don't have any competition because most people aren't even trying. Debbie.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for that. You mentioned that later on you want to conquer your speech impediment and you joined Toastmasters. And then later on you become actually an accomplished speaker and giving many, many talks and inspired many people. In 2007, you were honored with a Reach for the Stars trophy. And 2011 to 2012, you were being recognized by City of Cambridge, Who's Who, for demonstrating.
Yeah, excuse me.
Yeah.
That is a Cambridge Who's Who.
Yeah.
It's a speakers bureau run by, I hate to tell you, Donald Trump's son.
Okay. And you were being recognized for your dedication, leadership, and excellence in motivational speaking. And I have had the pleasure listening to many of your speeches. I'm wondering if you are able to share with us one of your favorite speeches. So let us hear Bill's speech, My First and Last Love.
Thank you, Debbie. I was only 10 years old when I first saw this little girl pass me in the school corridor. I didn't know then what the feelings were inside me as I watched her until she disappeared, but now I know. At that moment, a spark had been placed within my heart. It would be 7 years before I would speak to that little girl, now a beautiful young woman. And when I did, that spark flickered into a tiny flame. I always say that she was my first and last love, but in between my first and last love, I had many girlfriends. It was strange that we thought we were just good friends. And it wasn't until we were separated by 5,000 miles when I came to Canada that we discovered how strongly that flame was burning. I proposed to her, and some months later, my brave wee lassie sailed across the ocean to the land where we would become husband and wife. I always felt that she could have married a much better man, and sometimes she thought so too. But I tried to give her as much as I could without demanding much in return. I don't know if she felt the same way about me. All I do know is that she outgave me so many, many times. Perhaps it was this trying to outgive each other that we discovered the secret of a happy marriage life. It's not what you get out of married life, it's what you put into it that makes all the difference. In fact, our marriage was like a bank savings account. We kept putting in as much as we could, and as the days passed, the more we put in, the more we had. A day came when I had to make a withdrawal from that account, and it must come to us all, either through disappointment or sickness, or in my case, Christine had passed away. On that day, I looked at that account and I saw days where I had put in we had put in a lot. And then I noticed that there was days where I didn't put very much in. And there are days like that when it is so difficult, but we did manage to put something in. And then I noticed that something had been added to our bank account that neither of us put in. Banks call it interest. And what was our interest? The day our children were born or came to live with us, our son is adopted, or the day they went to school for the very first time, or the day they graduated from grade school, high school, college, university, or that day when my daughters took my arm and together we strode down the aisle in church to their handsome husbands-to-be. Yes, when I looked at that account, I had more in that account to warm the lonely days ahead. Until that day when God in his infinite wisdom carries me home to be rejoined in heaven for all eternity. But a song expresses it better. Warm as the Maywire and wild as the sea, these are the feelings she awakened in me. I've had my moments and a dream or two, but I needed someone all the time. And all the time, it was my first and last love. Debbie.
Thank you, Bill. Hi, Bill. Final questions. What you hope that your children and grandchildren will learn from your life? Can you share with me?
Well, I think my children have followed in my footsteps, and they in turn have passed on the same things to their children. So what started out as a disadvantage as a child, it has now flourished. My children are successful, my grandchildren are successful, and when the great-grandchildren come, I just wonder if they in turn will continue.
Thank you.
And I think the reason for this is that I let them go their own way. I didn't demand them to follow in my footsteps. They chose to follow in my footsteps. And that,
Thank you.
yes.
One final question. If there's only one encouragement that you could give us, what would be that one thing you would like to share?
Yeah. I would like to say to everyone that you can do anything you want to do. There's nothing stopping you. And if you take advantage of it, you can have a wonderful life. Right. But I know, as I said before, you don't really have any competition because very few people are trying.
Thank you so much, Bill. All the best.
Thank you.